Welcome to our game, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at everybody's favorite second streamer, Benjamin Bok, who's recently brought out a Nimzo Indian Defense course on Chessable. So check that out if you play the Nimzo. And in this game, he was playing with the white pieces against Richard Rapport, who everybody remembers from being Dinglerin second during the World Championship. We saw all the memes and everything, but as we know, Richard Rapport is one of the elite players in the world, known for his attacking flair and for his really interesting openings. And in this game against Benjamin Bok, he shows a ferocious attack and shows what happens when you don't pay attention to what your opponent is doing if you're too fixated on your own plans. So we're going to look at it from the black side, which is Rapport side. So we get E4, we get D6, D4, Knight F6, Knight C3, we get E5, then we get Knight F3, Knight to D7, B to D7, and here we get the Philidor defense, the line variation, which is, I think, a Simon Williams course. The line variation in the Philidor on Chessable as well. So check that out. A very attacking game. And then we get Bok plays C4, bishop to C4, then we get bishop to E7, and then we get A4. So a bit of a positional move, giving some space for this bishop to escape, gaining more space on the queen side, maybe thinking of pawn expansion later on. But it's quite interesting because in this position, white can actually take bishop to f7, and after king takes and knight g5 check, you can drop into this nice little cubby hole here after the queen moves to e8, has to move to e8 because it can't move here because it'll be captured. Then you get to fork the queen and the rook, but of course at elite level you would know to play queen to g6, and after castles and rook to b8. Black is slightly better, but there's a better variation of this. So going back to our position here, you play, instead of playing a4, you can play knight to g5, and then after castles, now you play bishop takes f6, f7, and again the knight gets into this nice little cubbyhole, and because this rook is now here, that means when the queen moves to here, it can no longer get out to attack. So you move, so you move queen to here, and now you get to win the rook. And so the queen goes back to d8, you take the rook, and the engine has this still slightly better for black, as white's knight is going to have a bit of a problem escaping, and of course white is not castled and there's still pieces to develop. But an interesting tactic to play and to be aware of, especially at a lower level than GM. But in the game we saw a4 by Bok, then we had c6, and then we had castles. We had queen to c7, and now we dropped the bishop back to a2 by Bok, then we had h6, and then we had d takes e5 and d takes e5, which is a bit of a, you can understand why it's an inaccuracy, because it gives this bishop scope now to jump in behind this knight or jump into c5 and then eventually drop back here. It gives the black bishop some scope, but when we look at this position, black's bishop is looking a bit sorry here. It's stuck. So I think that's why it's an inaccuracy. Then we had knight to h4 by Bok. Bok obviously had a plan all along to get in here. So because even if you castle, because of the pin here, it's just an annoying position to play. So we had h4, then we had knight to c5, and then we had knight to f5. And here Rapport was like, right, I'm going to take this knight out of the action. Bok takes back, and then we get castles. Then Benjamin Bok plays bishop to e3. Then we have e4, and then queen to e2. Then we had queen to e5, with ideas maybe possibly of bringing the rook to the open file, but ultimately if you can get this bishop in, you have a nice attacking target in the corner. So we get rook to a to e1, and then we get rook a to e8, queen to c4, and then we get bishop to d6. So lining up this checkmate, so we have to play G3. Now G3, of course, is after weakening the light squares around the king, and that's going to prove to be vital later in the game. So this is just all, grandmaster positional play, maneuvering to get an advantage. The advantage here for black, you've now got some light square weaknesses. You've got this pawn, which is possibly protecting a piece in this cubbyhole. So we'll see how Rapport makes this work in the game. So then we take the pawn, and of course this is setting up, let's just say white does a stupid move. We go here, and well, we're in a lot of trouble because when the knight gets here, we're going to be attacking for checkmate. So we queen f5, and here Benjamin Bok decides to play bishop to d4. Now bishop to d4, of course, the idea is that if you move the queen up here, well then I can now take this and damage your pawn structure. So what would you do in this position? Well, Rapport finds a really beautiful move of knight to d7, because knight to d7 is protecting any swap off of the bishop for the knight, because the next knight will just jump here, which means you can now play this attacking move if you wish. Now Benjamin Bok after this decides to go for rook to e2, maybe with the idea of doubling to attack this pawn, or maybe also thinking if you go here I will be able to push forward here. Something in this kind of means. Maybe that's what he was thinking about. But instead we see Richard Rapport decides to go bishop to e5, and here is where Bok decides to go wrong, because he's not paying attention to the threats on the board. He sees, well, now I got a free pawn. He takes the free pawn. Now this gives Rapport with a great idea, because now this knight, if he can get into this square, he can jump to where the bishop is, and he's got a really ferocious attack there. So what he does is trades off his bishop for the knight, which maybe didn't make a lot of sense. Then captures with the queen, because that means you don't lose a tempo when this move is played. So he plays knight to e5, and here Benjamin Bok plays bishop to c5, thinking, well, I'm attacking the rook here. That's exactly what I wanted. But this again fails to keep in mind what is happening on the board, because after this we get knight f3, check, and then king to g2. And here we see a really great move by Benjamin Bok. And can you see how he finished this game off in beautiful style? Sorry, by Richard Rapport. Benjamin Bok, of course, is defending with the white pieces, but Rapport plays a really lovely move of rook to e5. What is the plan here? Can you see it? So I'll give you the first move, which is by Benjamin Bok. He captures the rook, completely not paying attention to what Richie Rapport is doing. And there's a brilliant move here that completely wins the game in one move. Can you find it? I'm going to give you a few seconds, because this is wonderful. It is the outrageous and the simply brilliant queen to h3 check, meaning you have to take with the king. This square is covered, and you follow it up with rook to h5. Bringing your king back is the only move, and the beautiful rook takes h2 checkmate, showing how important it is to always pay attention to what your opponent is doing. Thank you for watching.